If you think the potato is the undisputed king of survival crops, you are betting your family's food security on a fragile lie. Don't get me wrong, potatoes are great until the temperature drops. One hard frost before harvest, and your entire potato crop turns into black rotting mush. One failure in your root cellar ventilation and months of work dissolve into a toxic puddle. But there is another root. A root that doesn't just tolerate the freezing cold, it thrives in it. While your potatoes are dying, this crop acts like a biological machine. It converts its starches into sugars, becoming sweeter, denser, and more nutritious as the snow piles up. It yields nearly double the biomass per acre compared to potatoes in poor soil. It has twice the vitamin C. And it can sit in a simple hole in your backyard for 6 months without electricity staying crisp as the day you pulled it. In the darkest winters of history, when the wheat failed and the potatoes rotted, this was the only thing standing between entire nations and starvation. It is known as the war root. But I have to stop you right there. Before you rush out to forage for this or plant an acre of it, you need to hear a critical warning. This is not a harmless carrot. First, if you are foraging, this plant has a deceptive twin in the wild. To the untrained eye, their tops look terrifyingly similar. But while one is a superfood, the other is a toxic imposter that can send you to the hospital in a matter of hours. Second, even if you grow it in your garden, this root holds a hidden chemical defense mechanism. If you eat it raw in large quantities thinking it's just a crunchy snack, it can quietly interfere with your thyroid and hormonal health. Do not click away, because the difference between the poison and the cure is just a matter of technique. By the end of this video, I will give you the 3-point identification rule to spot the imposter instantly and the simple thermal deactivation method to unlock the full power of this survival superfood safely. This is the story of the Rutabaga. Welcome to reclaimed nature. To understand why this ugly root is worth your attention, we don't look at a gardening book. We look at the history of human desperation. We have to travel back to one specific bone-chilling winter Germany, 1916. World War I was raging. The British Royal Navy had established a blockade so tight that the Central Powers were suffocating. Imports of fertilizer stopped. The wheat harvest failed. Then a massive blight wiped out the potato crop. The German people were staring into the abyss of famine. In the history books, this period has a name that sends shivers down the spine of anyone who lived through it. The Starch Winter, the Turnip Winter. The government seized all stocks of Rutabagas. Before the war, these coarse, purple-topped roots were considered animal fodder, something you fed to pigs and cattle to fatten them up. They were never meant for the dining table of a civilized society. But suddenly, they were the only thing left. For 6 frozen months, an entire nation ate nothing but rutabaga. They ate rutabaga soup for breakfast, rutabaga cutlets for lunch, rutabaga cakes for dinner. They dried it and ground it up to make a bitter substitute for coffee. They mashed it into flour to bake heavy, damp bread. It was miserable. It was monotonous. But here is the cognitive flip you need to understand. It worked. While the potato had failed them and the wheat had vanished, the rutabaga held the line. It provided enough vitamin C to prevent scurvy in a population that hadn't seen a fresh fruit in years. It provided dense, slow-burning carbohydrates that kept soldiers and civilians alive in sub-zero trenches and unheated apartments. It was the biological anchor that stopped a civilization from drifting into total extinction. The rutabaga proved it was the ultimate survival asset. It grew where nothing else would. It stored when nothing else could. But here is the paradox. You would think that after saving millions of lives, we would build statues for this plant. We would plant it in every garden as a safety net. We did the opposite. Instead of honoring it, we buried it. We erased it from our menus and pushed it back into the animal feed trough. Why did the plant stop working? Did it lose its nutrients? No. It committed a different kind of crime. It was too ugly for the modern world. So if this root is a nutritional tank that can survive a blockade, why isn't it in every vegetable garden in America? Why do you have to hunt for it in the dusty bottom corner of the produce aisle, usually coated in a thick layer of petroleum-based wax? The easy answer is taste. People say it's too bitter, but that's a lazy excuse. We eat kale, we drink black coffee, we love dark chocolate. Bitterness isn't the problem. The problem is industrial convenience. You see, the modern food system hates irregularity. The potato won the popularity contest not because it's better for you, but because it's better for the machines. A potato is relatively smooth, easy to peel mechanically, and perfect for slicing into uniform chips or fries. It fits the mold of fast food. The rutabaga is a rebel. It's lumpy. It has a thick, gnarly skin that demands effort to remove. It has a tough neck where the leaves attach. You can't just toss 1,000 rutabagas into an automated peeler and expect a perfect result. It resists the industrial process. And then there's the stigma of poverty. For decades after World War I and II, the rutabaga was branded as famine food. If you ate Swedes, it meant you couldn't afford meat or potatoes. It was the food of the desperate. My own grandfather refused to touch them until the day he died, because the smell alone brought back memories of freezing trenches. So we collectively decided to erase it. We chose the polite, easy-to-process potato, and we pushed the rugged rutabaga back into the animal feed trough. But here is the irony that should make you angry. By choosing convenience, we traded away resilience. We built a food system that relies on perfectly climate-controlled storage units and massive inputs of pesticides to keep potatoes alive. We threw away the biological bunker because it was too hard to peel. But while the supermarkets were busy banning it for being difficult, biologists were putting it under the microscope. And what they found is embarrassing for the potato industry. When you strip away the stigma and look at the cold, hard data, the rutabaga isn't just an alternative. It is a superior metabolic fuel. Let's look at the science. First, you need to understand what this thing actually is. The Rutabaga brassica napus is a natural hybrid, an accidental love child between a turnip and a cabbage. In biology, there is a phenomenon called hybrid vigor, heterosis. The offspring is often stronger, larger, and more resilient than either parent. The rutabaga inherited the massive root size of the turnip and the cold hardiness and dense leaf structure of the cabbage. It is a genetic masterpiece. According to USDA data, when you compare them ounce for ounce, while a potato is basically a packet of starch, about 17% carbohydrate with a bit of potassium, the rutabaga is a metabolic regulator. It has nearly half the carbohydrates of a potato, but don't let that fool you. This isn't about dieting, it's about sustained energy. The glycemic load is lower, meaning it doesn't spike your blood sugar and crash it later, a crucial factor when you are under stress in a survival situation. But the real killer stat is vitamin C. In the dead of winter, vitamin C is the hardest nutrient to scavenge. Scurvy was the biggest killer of sailors and soldiers for centuries. A potato has some vitamin C, yes, but it degrades rapidly in storage. A rutabaga. It is packed with up to 40–50% of your daily requirement in a single cup. And because the root is so dense that vitamin C is protected, you can pull a rutabaga out of a root cellar in February 3 months after harvest, and it still holds its nutritional integrity. It is effectively a living vitamin pill. Furthermore, research on brassica vegetables has identified potent compounds called glucosinolates. These are the sulfur-containing chemicals that give the rutabaga its slight bite. In the wild, they are natural pesticides that stop fungi and bugs from eating the root. Inside your body, science suggests these compounds trigger your own antioxidant defense systems. So while the potato is just keeping your calorie count up, the rutabaga is actively fighting inflammation and fortifying your immune system against the cold. The science is undeniable. It is a vitamin factory that runs on ice and dirt. But all this potential power is useless and potentially dangerous if you don't know the rules of engagement. Remember the twin imposter and the thyroid warning I mentioned at the start? Ignorance is what makes them dangerous. Knowledge makes them irrelevant. So let's turn this theory into a weapon. Here is exactly how to identify, grow, and neutralize the threat to reclaim this asset. Now let's turn this knowledge into an actionable survival system. You don't just plant rutabagas, you engineer them. First, let's disarm the traps I warned you about. The wild foraging rule. If you are ever scavenging and see a plant that looks like a wild carrot or parsnip near water, do not touch it. That is likely the habitat of water hemlock. The key difference is the root structure. Rutabaga is a single solid bulbous taproot like a spinning top. Water hemlock has a cluster of small finger-like tubers that smell musty. Rule of thumb, if you didn't plant it and it has purple spots on the stem, walk away. The risk is not worth the calorie reward. Stick to growing your own Swedes. The goitrogen solution. The thyroid-suppressing compounds in rutabagas are heat-sensitive. This is why you should never rely on raw rutabaga as a staple diet. The solution is simple: cook it. Boiling, roasting, or steaming deactivates the enzyme responsible for goitrogenic activity. By applying heat, you turn a potential toxin into safe high-density fuel. Now for the growing strategy. This is where most gardeners fail because they treat it like a spring radish. Strategy 1. The late start. Do not plant this in the spring. If you plant rutabaga when it's hot, it becomes woody, bitter, and tough as a boot. You want to time your planting so the root matures into the cold. Count back 90 days from your first expected frost date, usually midsummer. That is your planting window. Strategy 2. The frost sweetening protocol. When the first frost hits, your neighbors will rush to pull up their crops. You do nothing. You wait. This is the magic. When the temperature drops near freezing, the rutabaga plant realizes water inside its cells might freeze and rupture the cell walls. So it triggers a survival mechanism. It rapidly converts its stored starches into sugars. Sugar water freezes at a lower temperature than plain water. It's natural antifreeze. By leaving your rutabagas in the ground, through the first few light freezes, you are literally manufacturing sugar. The result is a root that is remarkably sweet, tender, and rich in flavor. You can't buy this taste in a supermarket because those were harvested too early for transport. Strategy 3. The clamp storage. You don't need a refrigerator. You can build a clamp. Dig a shallow pit, line it with straw, pile your rutabagas in a pyramid, and cover them with more straw and a layer of dirt. Leave a small tuft of straw at the top for ventilation. In this simple earth mound, a rutabaga will stay fresh for 4 to 6 months. It is a zero-electricity refrigerator that our ancestors used for millennia. We live in a world of fragile supply chains. We saw how quickly shelves can empty. Relying solely on the grocery store or even on fussy crops like potatoes that demand perfect conditions is a gamble. The rutabaga is ugly. It is tough. It demands work. But it is loyal. When the frost kills the peppers and the blight takes the potatoes and the trucks stop running, the rutabaga will be there waiting under the snow ready to feed you. Don't let the industrial food system dictate what you eat. Don't let the fear of a little dirt or a thick peel stop you. Reclaim the war root. Add this layer of armor to your garden. Because true independence doesn't start with a weapon. It starts with a seed that refuses to die. I'm the architect of reclaimed nature. Build your systems, grow your assets, and I'll see you in the next harvest.